Welcome to Norfolk and Suffolk Care Support series of Wellbeing Bite-size videos, hosted by Amanda Collins of ACC. Each session in our series is designed to be either done by yourself or with your team and can be undertaken at work or at home. This session is roughly 15 minutes long.
Hello everybody, I'm Amanda Collins, and today we're going to look at the Wellbeing Bucket as part of your toolkit for managing stress, managing anxiety and managing well-being. So today we're going to look at how to stop your well-being bucket from overflowing or how to keep it empty. So the session is all about you recognizing your stress triggers, as well as recognizing how you personally react to events that you find stressful. And it's also about you thinking about what actions can I take going forward to stop my well-being bucket from spilling over. So let's take a look at the well-being bucket. So if we imagine inside of us, we have a receptacle, a bucket, and the day-to-day stresses, those things that make demands upon us, perhaps it's our workload, perhaps it's worry about our own health, being in a COVID pandemic, for example. Perhaps it's that we're worrying about others. Perhaps it's concerns about our performance at work and our ability to juggle perhaps work and home. Maybe it's about uncertainty. Maybe it's about worry. Perhaps it's about deadlines, interruptions whilst trying to work in the office or at home, for example. So if we imagine those concerns, let's call them stresses, that just like the rain from a cloud, they fill up our well-being bucket. Okay, now if we don't do something about those day-to-day stresses, whether they're big stresses or small stresses, that bucket is likely to overflow. And when it overflows, we then have a sense of feeling stressed or anxious or fearful or worried. And what can be hugely helpful is to become aware of those stresses, but also to become aware of how we personally react to stress, the physiological changes, the emotional changes, and the changes in our thinking processes. And if we become aware of that, we can then engage in some well-being strategies, activities that empty that well-being bucket. And in so doing, makes us feel calmer and more relaxed. Some of you may have heard of the fight or the flight response. And the fight and the flight response is a autonomic or automatic reaction when we feel, whether it be conscious or unconscious, when we're in a situation that we feel that we don't have the resources to cope with the demands that are placed upon us. So the fight response may be when we start to get feisty, we perhaps become a little bit angry, a little bit aggressive, perhaps frustrated maybe. And that response is a way of gearing us up, gearing our bodies up to deal with that stress or that perceived danger that we feel we are in. For others, they may move into the flight response. So instead of that feisty response, it's a response of withdrawal. So those symptoms may be about keeping a low profile. It may be about disengaging with others. And again, that's a protective mechanism when we feel that we don't have the internal as well as maybe the external resources to help us through that difficult, stressful response. Physiologically, some of you may recognize that when you feel under pressure, when you feel that you don't have the resources to manage that situation, you have maybe sweaty hands, maybe dry mouth, maybe a sudden need and urge to go to the bathroom, for example. Okay, and that's the body's way of preparing us for that perceived stress, that perceived danger. Stress in the long term can lead to some health problems. So, not only psychologically feeling unwell, it can lead to tension, it can lead to muscle pains, aches, it can cause headaches, as well as lower our immune system, so that we, instead of perhaps having one cold a year, we are more susceptible to that second cold or that third bout of illness throughout the year. Recognize it, clock it, stop it. So, by understanding what our stresses are, what we can do is think about, do I have an opportunity to avoid that stressor? Perhaps we call it a trigger. If I'm aware that I can't avoid that stressor, perhaps I can think about some strategies that I can engage with in order to deal with that stressor. So it might be, for example, progressive muscle relaxation, or it may be about asking for support or additional resources. Okay, so now that we're aware of what causes us stress and we're tuned in to know how we individually respond to stress, that next action is to think about and take control over what am I going to do to manage my stress and enhance my well-being. So it may be exercise. So exercise is really useful, physical activity, because it negates some of the unhelpful fats, sugars, and hormones that are released into our bodies when we do feel stressed. It also releases the tension in our muscles that causes headaches and back pain, etc. We mentioned triggers. So if we are aware of the things or the triggers that cause us stress, then we can make choices about whether to deal with those triggers or indeed avoid those triggers. A simple technique is to, be aware that we are all only human and that maybe we should be a little bit kinder to ourselves and maybe not put so much pressure or expectations onto ourselves. Another technique is knowing our anchors. So an anchor is something that we know works for us. So when we are stressed, we tend to not want to go to the gym, not want to maybe engage in exercise or something distracting and pleasurable. But if we say to ourselves, yep, next time I recognize my stress, recognize those symptoms, I will engage in my anchor. Yeah, so that could be a walk, it could be physical exercise, it could be watching a film. Yep, so it's recognizing and implementing what you know works. Another tool is to prioritize. When there's a lot going on, everything seems equally as important. But when we're stressed, we tend to engage more with our emotional side of the brain rather than the rational side. So putting time aside to prioritize and maybe allocate time for each task so that you're taking control, managing those tasks around you. Taking time out to relax. So one of our other videos is a 20-minute relaxation exercise. So that may be something for you to do. Event buddy is somebody that we know we can talk to, even if we don't seem to make sense at the time because we're feeling overwhelmed and stressed. But event buddy is somebody that we can just talk to, say it as it is without being judged. And by the time we've told our story, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times, by the end of it, we seem to calmly understand and make sense of that problem that was causing us stress. So if you haven't got yourself a vent buddy, think about who could be your vent buddy. Take time out. So, we all work in a busy world, but, it's really important to come away from the laptop, make yourself a cup of tea, don't bring it back to the laptop, go and sit somewhere else, take a walk around the garden, but give yourself time out, time for you. When we're stressed, some of us may lean towards foods that give us comfort, maybe starchy foods, things that give us that comfort when we need it. But when we're stressed, eating healthily, eating colourful food actually makes us feel better. If it looks good, it's more likely to be healthy for us, which in turn enhances our well-being. When we're stressed, we tend to let go of the things that we enjoy, such as hobbies. So when we're stressed, it can be really enjoyable to pick up our hobbies, whether that be crochet, whether that be knitting, whether it be a sporting activity or any kind of craft activity. So think about the hobbies that you've enjoyed in the past. Think about how and when you could reintroduce those into your daily or weekly schedule. Thought stopping is another strategy that you could use. This can be hugely helpful when we feel burdened by ruminations or thoughts that just keep going round and round. We're often not consciously aware of them, but what we can do is clock them and stop them. So by being more aware of them, we can then choose to focus on something more helpful, something that makes us feel more relaxed. So it could be about reading a book, it could be about going for a walk, doing some gardening, for example. So thought stopping is clocking those unhelpful thoughts and stopping those unhelpful thoughts. So we've spent a little bit of time recognizing stress. We've looked at the importance of knowing how we react to stress, and we've introduced the Wellbeing Bucket for self-awareness. And that next step is about managing your stresses. What works for one person may not necessarily work for another person. What I'd encourage you to do is, after today, think about what might work for me. What will I try and when will I try it? So I guess we're saying, think about a wellbeing action plan for yourself. Thank you everybody for attending our video.